Hey there, traveler. Tonight, we enter a palace of mirrors, where every reflection hides a ghost. Our story begins in Florence, the city of art, ambition, and poison. The year is 1519. A child is born to the most feared family in Italy, the Medici. Her name, Catherine. She will grow up in exile, orphaned before she can walk, whispered about as the daughter of devils. Her family finances popes, her uncles rule cities, her cousins command armies. But little Catherine, she has nothing, except her name. The girl who sleeps among nuns will one day become Queen of France. The woman who loves her children will drown them in war, and the mother who dreams of peace will set her kingdom on fire. Tonight's story is not about monsters. It's about what happens when love, fear, and power become the same thing. So dim the lights, let the candles flicker, and listen to The Iron Widow. Florence, 1527. The city burns under the banners of rebellion. The Medici family, once masters of art and gold, are now hunted like thieves. And in a dark convent, a 9-year-old girl listens to the echo of soldiers breaking through the gates. Her name is Catherine. Her parents are gone. Her mother dead in childbirth. Her father taken by fever. She is the last blood of a dynasty that ruled with silk gloves and iron hearts. As the rebels storm the convent, they shout, "Find the Medici girl, the devil's child." They drag her from her bed, a child in rags, trembling but unbroken. For 11 days, she is paraded through the streets, jeered at, cursed, and hidden again by nuns who risk their lives to protect her. They call her the little Duchess, but she owns nothing. No land, no crown, only her family's shadow. In those cold corridors, Catherine learns her first lesson. That power is not about beauty or birth. It is about survival. And she will remember that forever. Years later, when the Medici are restored, she is sent to Rome under the guardianship of Pope Clement VII, her uncle. The Holy Father looks at the child and sees not innocence, but opportunity. France needs peace. The Medici need legitimacy. So the Pope whispers to his advisors, "Find her a prince." That prince would be Henry of Orleans, the second son of the King of France. A match born not of love, but calculation. Catherine is 14. Henry is 14. And neither understands that they have just been placed upon a chessboard that will be soaked in blood. The marriage is sealed with gold, incense, and deception. The bells of Marseille ring, but behind the hymns there is a warning. The girl from Florence carries both blessing and curse. The royal court laughs at her accent, her plain face, her dowry of politics rather than wealth. But Catherine smiles quietly, because Florence taught her this. Those who are underestimated are the most dangerous of all. Paris, 1533. The city glows with torches and wine. Trumpets echo through the palace of Fontainebleau. A new princess has arrived, Catherine de Medici, now Duchess of Orleans. The French court welcomes her with smiles made of glass. She walks through corridors lined with silk and secrets, where every whisper has teeth. The nobles bow, but they do not respect her. They call her the banker's niece, the foreign girl, the merchant's daughter who bought herself a prince. Her husband, Henry, is handsome, distant, and quiet. He does not meet her eyes at the altar. When they dance, he moves like a ghost, his gaze fixed elsewhere, on a woman twice his age, draped in black and pearls. Her name is Diane de Poitiers. Catherine watches silently as Diane takes Henry's hand, whispers in his ear, and laughs softly at his every word. She is elegant, intelligent, and utterly untouchable. The new bride understands everything without a single explanation. Henry's heart, his loyalty, his soul, they all belong to another. For years, Catherine will sleep beside him in silence, listening to him murmur Diane's name in his dreams. She will smile at breakfast, curtsy at court, and pretend not to bleed inside. The ladies of France mock her accent, her plain gowns, her barren womb. She cannot give the king's son an heir, and in the glittering poison of the Valois court, a wife without a child is a wife without a reason to live. Catherine kneels in her private chapel each night, whispering to the Virgin, "Give me a son, and I will give you anything." Years pass, the gossip grows. Henry's love for Diane deepens, and Catherine, the little Florentine girl who survived revolts and ridicule, begins to study something far more dangerous than prayer: alchemy, prophecy, and the art of patience. One night, a strange Italian astrologer arrives at court, Nostradamus. He tells her softly, "Madam, the stars favor you, but your crown will be forged in blood." Catherine smiles, not in joy, but in understanding, because deep inside, she already knows. Fate has chosen her not to be loved, but to endure. The years drift by like smoke. The French court forgets Catherine de Medici even exists. She attends every feast, every hunt, every christening of another woman's child, always smiling, always silent. For 10 long years, she bears no heir. Whispers fill the corridors like a plague. The Italian witch is barren. God has cursed her womb. Some even suggest the king should set her aside and marry again. But Catherine refuses to yield. She writes letters to physicians, midwives, astrologers. She drinks bitter tonics, prays to relics, and sleeps with charms beneath her pillow. And then, one spring morning, the bells of the palace ring. Not for death, but for birth. Catherine gives France a son, and then another, and another. In a decade, she will bear 10 children. The woman once mocked as barren now holds the future of the French crown in her arms. But her triumph comes with a price. Her husband, Henry, remains in the shadow of Diane de Poitiers. Every royal decision, every gift, every public gesture goes through Diane first. Catherine smiles through her humiliation. She attends the older woman's banquets, wears her chosen jewels, even lets her hold the royal infants for portrait sittings. And all the while, Catherine learns. She studies the way Diane moves through power, not with swords, but with softness. She sees how flattery, secrets, and favors shape men far better than threats. In private, Catherine begins building her own alliances: clerics, merchants, Italian scholars. She collects books on astronomy, on poisons, on the properties of rare herbs. Knowledge becomes her armor. Patience becomes her weapon. And quietly, behind the smiling mask, she swears to herself, "The day will come when they will all bow to me." In 1547, that day arrives. King Francis I dies, and Henry becomes King Henry II of France. Catherine is now queen, at last. The courtiers bow, the bells ring, and France rejoices. But Diane de Poitiers still stands beside the king's throne, and as Catherine kneels to kiss her husband's hand, she feels Diane's jeweled fingers resting lightly on his shoulder. One throne, 2 women, 1 crown, and a war that will never end. Paris, 1559. The air hums with celebration. France is at peace, at least for now. The royal court gathers for a grand tournament to honor the marriage of Catherine's daughter, Elizabeth, to the King of Spain. The streets bloom with banners, trumpets echo, and the sun glints on the golden armor of King Henry II of France. Catherine watches from her balcony, her face hidden behind a lace veil. She has learned to smile for crowds. She has learned to hide everything else. The king lifts his lance and charges toward his opponent, the Scottish knight Montgomery. The crowd roars as the two collide. A shatter of wood, a flash of sunlight, and then silence. The lance splinters through Henry's visor. A single shard pierces his eye, driving deep into his skull. He falls. The crowd screams. Catherine does not move. Her heart stops, not from love, but from fate. For years, Nostradamus had warned her. The lion shall be wounded through the eye by the younger lion, and death shall come slowly. Now the prophecy blooms before her eyes. Henry lingers for 10 agonizing days, his face swollen, his breath rattling. Catherine never leaves his side. Diane de Poitiers, forbidden from entering the sick room, waits outside the palace walls. On the 10th night, Henry dies. His last words are not for his queen. They are for Diane. But when the bells toll for the king's death, Catherine does not weep. She stands beside his body in full black mourning, not as widow, not as wife, but as a ruler. The very next morning, she orders Diane de Poitiers to return all royal jewels, estates, and titles. The king's mistress obeys, silently. Her power is over. For the first time in her life, Catherine de Medici walks through the halls of the Louvre without fear. The courtiers bow deeply now. They whisper her new name, La Reine Noire, the Black Queen. But France itself is trembling. Her son, Francis II, is only 15. The kingdom is divided by religion, Catholics and Protestants, ready to tear each other apart. And behind every noble smile hides ambition sharper than a dagger. Catherine, the widow of a king, now holds a crown that drips with danger. She knows she cannot rely on faith or love. She can only rely on fear. The Iron Widow has finally risen. The year is 1559. The bells of Notre Dame toll for a dead king. But within the echo of mourning begins a new reign, one built on whispers, fear, and the trembling hands of a boy. Francis II, 15 years old, inherits the crown of France. He is delicate, uncertain, and deeply in love, not with his kingdom, but with his wife, Mary, Queen of Scots. Together, they look like angels in miniature, porcelain faces framed in gold. But angels make poor rulers. Around them, the kingdom seethes. The great noble families, the Guises and the Bourbons, circle like wolves, Catholics against Protestants, each sharpening their blades in the name of God. Catherine de Medici, now Queen Mother, watches it all from behind her mourning veil. She holds no throne, yet the court knows. Nothing moves without her consent. The Guise brothers, proud uncles to young Mary, dominate the boy king. They whisper in his ear. They command the armies. They make and break laws in his name. Catherine smiles and nods, playing the part of the obedient widow. But in secret, she keeps her own counsel. Every night, she writes letters, not to one side, but to both. To the Catholic Duke of Guise, she promises loyalty. To the Protestant Prince of Condé, she promises mercy. And to the people, she promises peace. No one knows where her true faith lies, and that is exactly how she survives. In the council chamber, she says little, but when the lords begin shouting, she speaks softly evenly, and the room falls silent. Even men twice her age lower their eyes. They sense something colder than steel behind her calm words. Yet fate has other plans. Francis II, frail and feverish, rules for barely a year before death finds him too. His skull swells from infection. His breath falters. Catherine stays beside him, whispering prayers she no longer believes in. When he dies, she closes his eyes and says quietly, "I have lost my son, but not my power." The throne now passes to her second son, Charles IX. He is 10 years old, and the woman once dismissed as barren, foreign, and weak now becomes regent of France. The court that mocked her must kneel, the nobles who scorned her must beg, and the kingdom, bleeding between faiths, looks to her for salvation. Catherine knows what they do not. Salvation always demands a sacrifice. Paris, 1560s. The Louvre is no longer a palace. It is a chessboard, and Catherine de Medici plays every piece herself. Her son, Charles IX, now older, is fragile and fearful. The boy laughs too loudly, trembles too easily, and wakes screaming from dreams of fire. Catherine soothes him, brushing his hair back with the same hands that sign edicts of death by dawn. France is no longer a kingdom. It is a wound. Catholics and Protestants, nobles and peasants, neighbor against neighbor. A single spark can ignite the entire realm. Catherine walks the line between them like a tightrope made of glass. She arranges marriages, truces, and feasts, each one meant to keep the peace, each one secretly soaked in fear. She calls for tolerance, but the word means something different in every ear. To the Protestants, the Huguenots, it is hope. To the Catholics, it is heresy. And so, she becomes both savior and serpent. At night, she walks the palace corridors with her astrologers, reading the stars for signs of betrayal. She trusts no one, not her council, not her servants, not even her sons. When the Duke of Guise marches against the Protestants, Catherine feigns ignorance. When the Prince of Condé plots rebellion, she feigns sympathy. Each faction believes she is on their side, and in truth, she is on no one's, only France's, and perhaps her own. She sends secret letters in invisible ink. She meets ambassadors in gardens at midnight. She poisons the wine of those who cross her too far, slowly, discreetly, mercifully. The courtiers whisper that the Queen Mother has become a witch. Some even claim her black gowns hide phials of poison sewn into the seams. Others say she keeps Italian alchemists locked beneath the Louvre, distilling her will into liquid fear. But Catherine is not a witch. She is something rarer, a woman who refuses to die in a man's world. And when the opportunity arises to end the war once and for all, she takes it. Her daughter, Marguerite de Valois, will marry Henry of Navarre, a Protestant prince. The union will unite the two faiths, she says. A wedding to heal a nation. Bells ring across Paris. Thousands of nobles and courtiers flood the city for the celebration. But beneath the music, beneath the perfume and laughter, a blade is being sharpened. Because Catherine knows, where peace falls, fear must finish the work. Paris, August 1572. The bells of Notre Dame ring in celebration. Flags flutter from every tower. It is the wedding of Marguerite de Valois, Catherine's radiant daughter, and Henry of Navarre, the Huguenot prince who is meant to end decades of war. For one brief week, the city pretends to believe in peace. The narrow streets smell of flowers and wine. Protestant nobles walk beside Catholic cardinals, smiling through clenched teeth. Catherine stands on the palace balcony, her black gown gleaming like oil in the sun. Her face gives nothing away. Inside the Louvre, feasts unfold beneath gold ceilings. Toasts are raised, laughter echoes, but beneath the tablecloths, hands rest on daggers. Then comes the gunshot. On the third night, an attempt is made on the life of Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, the Protestant leader and guest of honor. He survives, barely. His followers rage through the city, demanding justice. The Catholics panic. Catherine sees the balance collapsing like a bridge in floodwater. In the dark of her chambers, she meets with her council. The room smells of wax and sweat. Voices whisper one question. If they strike first, we die. Catherine closes her eyes. When she opens them, she speaks only 2 words. Do it. The bells toll again, this time not for marriage, but for murder. Before dawn on August 24th, St Bartholomew's Day, the royal guards move through Paris with torches. Doors are marked with white crosses. The first scream cuts the silence like a blade. Then another, and another. The streets become rivers of blood. The Seine runs red beneath the bridges. Coligny is dragged from his bed, his body thrown from a window into the gutter below. His killers shout, "God wills it." And Paris answers with 1,000 echoes. The massacre spreads beyond the walls to Rouen, Lyon, Bordeaux. Every city that once prayed for peace now prays for mercy. From her balcony, Catherine watches the smoke rise. Her face is carved from stone. Later, when her son Charles stumbles into her chamber, pale and shaking, he cries, "My God, what have we done?" Catherine takes his hand and whispers, "We have saved France." But even she knows it is a lie. The wedding that was meant to unite the kingdom has instead baptized it in terror. Her daughter Marguerite hides her husband beneath the bed to save his life. The bride and groom survive, but the marriage of France's faiths is dead forever. Outside, the bells keep ringing, as if the heavens themselves can't tell the difference between celebration and damnation. The years slip away like candle wax. Paris has rebuilt its walls, but not its soul. The blood has dried, yet the memory stains every stone. Catherine de Medici is old now, 60, then 70. Her black gowns have become her second skin. Courtiers still bow, but the fear in their eyes has turned to pity. Her son, Henry III, sits on the throne, proud, theatrical, and uncertain. He wears jewels like armor, prays loudly, laughs too hard. Catherine watches him and wonders whether she has created a king or another tragedy. The wars of religion still burn. France is a body with too many wounds to heal. Catherine rides from city to city, frail and coughing, still negotiating peace between men who will not listen. When she enters a chamber, silence still follows her. She speaks softly. They obey. But the world is changing. Gunpowder and scripture have replaced fear. Her once endless letters now tremble in her hands. France, she writes, is not a kingdom of believers anymore. It is a kingdom of corpses. One winter evening in 1589, word comes to her bedside. Henry III has been murdered by a fanatic monk. The last of her sons, the final crown she guarded with blood and prayer, is gone. She does not cry. She simply closes her eyes and says, "I am too tired to mourn." Within weeks, she follows him into history. Her funeral procession moves through Paris under heavy skies. The streets are lined with faces. Some whisper prayers, others curses. The people cannot decide whether to bless her or blame her. and perhaps that is fitting. For Catherine de Medici was never meant to be loved. She was meant to endure. She ruled through fear when love failed. She forged peace from ruin, and ruin from peace. She gave France her sons, her soul, and finally, her silence. When they lay her body in Saint-Denis, beside the kings she served and the ghosts she made, the bells of Paris toll once more, deep, slow, and uncertain. And somewhere beyond the sound, in the quiet between echoes, a voice seems to whisper, "I kept the kingdom alive. The Iron Widow has fallen, but her shadow still stands, stretching through centuries. A reminder that history's monsters are often made, not born."
The final chapter of Catherine's life unfolds like the last page of a forbidden book. The once mighty Queen Mother walks through the halls of the Château de Blois. Her steps slower, her breath softer, her eyes shadowed by decades of secrets. France has become a land of ghosts. The wars of religion continue to flicker like dying embers, and the crown Catherine fought to protect now rests on fragile heads. Her grandson, the future Henry IV, will someday bring peace. But for now, the kingdom remains a battlefield of faith and fear. Catherine's last years are spent not in triumph, but in reflection. She gathers her grandchildren, tells them stories of Florence, of art, of a world before swords divided her heart. She warns them that power is a double-edged blade, and that survival often demands impossible choices. In the quiet of her chamber, she reads letters from her youth, notes from her uncle the Pope, from her husband Henry, from the astrologers who once promised her that the stars could be tamed. She smiles, not with bitterness, but with a kind of sad wisdom. She has learned that history is never kind to those who rule in shadows. When death comes for Catherine de Medici in January 1589, it comes quietly, no fanfare, no grand pronouncements. It's just a final breath in a candlelit room. The queen who once ruled through fear leaves behind a legacy written in ink, blood, and the silence of forgotten dreams. And as the candles burn down, the shadows of the past fade into the stone. Catherine de Medici, the Iron Widow, the Black Queen, becomes a figure of legend, a ghost who still walks the halls of history. And so, our story ends, not with a scream, but with a whisper. For in the end, even the fiercest queens must sleep. The year is 1580. The French court no longer glitters with gold. It flickers. The palaces smell of dust and incense. The corridors echo with memories rather than music. Catherine de Medici, once the spider at the center of the web, moves slowly now. Each step, a whisper of what she once was. Her hair has turned silver, but her eyes remain sharp. Twin mirrors that have seen too much. The courtiers still bow, but only out of habit. They gossip that the Queen Mother communes with ghosts, that she prays to no god but her own reflection. She ignores them. She has outlived almost everyone, her enemies, her lovers, even her sons. Of her 10 children, only 3 still breathe. The rest she carries in silence. When she sits by the fire at night, she speaks to them softly, as if they're in the next room. Francis, the gentle one. Charles, the haunted one. Henry, the vain one. "I kept your thrones safe," she whispers. But the crown was heavier than I imagined. Outside, the wars continue. France is torn between 3 Henrys. Henry III, her son. Henry of Navarre, her Protestant son. And Henry of Guise, the Iron Catholic warlord who dreams of seizing the throne. The people call it La Guerre, des Trois Henrys. The War of the 3 Henrys. Catherine, old and weary, becomes the weary mother of them all. She tries once more to play the peacekeeper, sending letters, forging truces, arranging secret meetings in candlelit abbeys. But her magic is fading. The younger men laugh at her caution, her diplomacy. They want war, glory, blood. The queen who once bent popes and princes to her will now watch us as the kingdom burns beyond her reach. Yet even in decline, Catherine remains formidable. When she enters the royal council, conversation stops. Her presence still commands the room. The authority of memory itself. She reminds them that every feast they enjoy, every palace they inherit, exists because she once had the strength to keep France breathing. But she feels her own breath shorten. Coughs linger, her doctors speak in riddles. The astrologers, once her comfort, now avoid her gaze. At night, she dreams of Florence, of her childhood convent, of the smell of candle wax, of a little girl with nothing but her name. And she realizes that after all the crowns, all the wars, all the ghosts, she has come full circle. The same silence that once surrounded the orphan of Florence now waits for the widow of France. Night settles heavy over the Chateau de Blois. The fire burns low. The air tastes of damp stone and age. The Queen Mother no longer sleeps. She wanders the corridors with a candle, its flames shivering like the kingdom she once ruled. The courtiers whisper that she talks to the dead. Maybe she does. In the stillness of the great hall, she sometimes hears them. The soft laughter of her children, the clash of swords from St Bartholomew's night, the sigh of her husband's ghost asking if she regrets the crown. She answers quietly, "No, my love. I regret that the world made me choose between mercy and survival." On her writing desk lies a bundle of fading parchment. They are letters from Michel de Nostradam, the man the world would remember as Nostradamus. Decades ago, he had looked into her eyes and said, "Madame, your sons shall wear crowns, yet your line shall wither before your bones are cold." She had laughed then. Now, the words ring like iron. Her dynasty is dying. One son poisoned by power, another by sorrow, the third consumed by vanity. Sometimes she orders her attendants to read her the old prophecies again, as if hoping the words might change with age. The lions shall fall to the younger. Blood shall rain from the heavens. France shall be ruled by one born not of the lily, but of the flame. They frighten the maids. They do not frighten her. Catherine has learned that prophecy is only memory in disguise the past, written before it happens. Outside, thunder rolls across the lawn. The rain beats against the windows, as if heaven itself were trying to wash away the sins of the She stands by the glass, watching her reflection blur in the storm, seeing not a queen, but a survivor. The candle trembles in her hand. She murmurs, "I built peace out of ashes. I fed France, my children, and still the world calls me monster." In the corner of the chamber, the astrologer's globe glints faintly. Once, it was her map of destiny. Now, it is a relic of faith, cracked, dust-covered, but still turning slowly, as if the stars themselves have not yet decided her fate. The next morning, she orders a mass to be said for all the souls lost in her name. Not just kings and princes, but peasants, servants, and the nameless dead who drowned in the flood of her decisions. The priest stumbles over the words. Catherine finishes them for him, her voice steady, her eyes fixed on the crucifix above the altar. Domini non sam digna. Lord, I am not worthy. The church falls silent. For the first time in half a century, the queen prays not for France, but for her own soul. That night, she dreams of Florence again, the scent of orange blossoms, the echo of laughter in marble courtyards, her cousin Cosimo, smiling as he teaches her to read the stars. When she wakes, her pillow is damp with tears she does not remember shedding. The court physician enters quietly. He tells her that her lungs are failing. She smiles faintly and says, "Then let them fail gently. I have carried too much breath for one lifetime." He bows and leaves. The candle gutters out, and for a moment, it seems that the whole castle exhales with her alone. Weary sigh of a kingdom that has finally grown tired of war. The year France finally begins to devour itself. The court astrologers say Mars rules the heavens, the planet of war and blood. Catherine de Medici sits in her chambers, listening to the distant drums of rebellion echo through the valley. She knows what they mean. 3 men now claim her son's crown. Henry III, the weary, childless king. Henry of Navarre, the Protestant heir by blood. Henry of Guise, the Catholic warlord who thinks faith is a sword. The kingdom is no longer divided by rivers or mountains, but by belief itself. Everywhere, towns burn under banners of Christ. Families split across dinner tables. One son fights for Rome, another for Geneva. The air smells of smoke and sermons. Catherine watches it all unfold from her window, the Loire glinting below like a blade. She writes letters, hundreds of them, pleading for reason, begging her son to listen. But Henry III is tired of her counsel. He wears perfume instead of armor, dances instead of ruling. "Mother," he says, "the crown no longer fits my head." She answers softly, "Then it will fit your coffin." In Paris, Henry of Guise rises like a saint with a sword. The people call him Duck. They carry his image through the streets as if he were a savior. The king trembles. "He is adored," Catherine warns. "That makes him dangerous." But the king, indecisive and vain, does nothing. Then, one morning, in December 1588, Guise walks into the royal council chamber at Blois, proud, smiling, and never walks out again. Henry III's guards strike him down at the king's order. Blood soaks the cold stone floor. The Duke of Guise, the people's holy warrior, lies dead at the feet of the monarch he wanted to replace. Catherine hears the news from her sick. She closes her eyes, not in horror, but in resignation. "You have killed a man," she tells her son, "but given birth to 1,000 martyrs." Outside, Paris erupts. The Catholic League vows vengeance. Priests preach rebellion. The people storm the streets crying, "Death to the Valois. Death to the Serpent Queen." Catherine's heart begins to fail. She coughs until blood stains her linen. The doctor begs her to rest. Rest, she murmurs. Not while France dreams of murder. She summons Henry I last time. The king kneels beside her bed. Her voice is faint, but sharp as ever. "I told your father you would break this crown. Do not let it shatter completely." Henry presses her hand, but she feels only the tremor of fear in his fingers. "France will never forgive me," he whispers. She answers, "France forgives no one. Only history does." Weeks later, Catherine de Medici dies. The court falls silent. They bury her quietly at Blois. The wars rage on without her. Before the year ends, Henry III himself is dead, stabbed by a monk while praying beside her empty chair. And with him, the House of Valois dies too. Catherine's bloodline, the dynasty she spent her entire life protecting, vanishes into the smoke of civil war. But her legacy does not vanish. It lingers like perfume in an empty hall. Heavy, sweet, and impossible to forget. When Catherine de Medici died in January 1589, her body lay in the chapel of Blois, wrapped in black silk, her rosary wound around fingers that had once held the fate of Europe. Outside, France was collapsing. Her last son, Henry III, fled Paris disguised as a monk. Hunted by his own subjects, the Catholic League ruled the streets, and the name of Medici was cursed from every pulpit. Yet even in death, she still shaped what came next. For there remained one man, the man she had once called both her enemy and her hope, Henry of Navarre. A Protestant, a heretic, and now the only living heir to the throne of France. When news reached him of Catherine's passing, he is said to have stood silently for a long time, then whispered, "The kingdom has lost its truest keeper." It was not flattery. Henry of Navarre understood what she had done, the bargains, the poison, the prayers. He had fought against her, cursed her name. Yet in his heart he knew, without Catherine, there would be no France left to rule. The wars raged on. Henry of Navarre fought his way across a bleeding country, carrying not banners, but exhaustion. He won battles, lost cities, and every time the church called him the devil, he smiled and said, "Perhaps, but even the devil loves his people." In 1593, standing in the Cathedral of St Denis, The same place where Catherine's tomb still waited Henry made his choice. "Paris is well worth a mass," he said. And with those words, he renounced Protestantism, took the crown, and became Henry IV of France, the first Bourbon king. The people cheered, though many didn't know why. They were simply tired of dying. Under Henry IV, France finally began to breathe again. Roads were repaired, the markets reopened. Children grew up without learning the sound of cannon fire. The new king ruled with a strange kind of warmth, practical, forgiving, almost Medici-like. He spoke softly to farmers, drank wine with soldiers, and promised that one day every family in France would have a chicken in their pot on Sunday. He built his kingdom not on miracles, but on mercy. In many ways, Henry IV became what Catherine had always dreamed her sons could be: strong, clever, and kind enough to survive. Yet even he could not escape her shadow. Visitors to the Louvre still swore they saw a figure in black glide across the marble floors. Long after midnight, a faint scent of orris and incense in her wake. They said she watched every new king, measuring him, judging him. Perhaps she was waiting for one who would finally deserve the crown she kept alive. When Henry IV signed the Edict of Nantes in 1598, granting religious freedom and ending the wars of religion, an old servant of the Medici family wept and said, "The queen would have smiled." Maybe she did. Maybe, somewhere between heaven and history, Catherine de Medici finally found peace. She had lived through prophecy and plague, through massacre and motherhood. She had ruled from the shadows, loved in secret, and died misunderstood. But France endured, and that, more than any crown or chapel, was her monument. So, when the bells of Paris rang again for peace, they rang not only for the new king, but for the ghost who had bought him time. History remembers kings for the wars they started. It remembers Catherine de Medici for the wars she ended too late, but not in vain. The bells of St Denis fade into silence. Body Six hails, weary but alive. Centuries will pass before the smoke of Catherine's age truly clears. But even now, her shadow lingers in every stone of the Louvre, in every decision made behind closed doors, where power still whispers in a woman's voice. History will call her many things: the Black Queen, the Serpent, the Mother of Kings. Yet beneath the ink and rumor lies something simpler. A girl from Florence who learned too early that mercy is expensive. She never wore the crown for herself. She wore it for survival, for the fragile idea that France might one day belong more to reason than to rage. And though she failed, she also succeeded because France survived her, and in surviving her, learned. Every king after her would study her letters, her maps, her quiet policies. Richelieu would call her the mother of modern diplomacy. Historians would argue, poets would curse, but none would forget. In the galleries of the Louvre, her portrait still hangs. Black lace, pale hands, eyes that follow you wherever you stand. Some say if you look long enough, the expression changes from cruelty to sorrow, from pride to peace. Time has a way of softening monsters, of showing that even cruelty can come from love that has nowhere else to go. Catherine's France became the seed of another world, one that would someday give birth to enlightenment. To revolution, to reason over faith. She never saw that dawn, but she built the night that made it possible. So, when you walk through Paris at dusk, when the Seine turns gold and the bells echo through the mist, listen closely. You might still hear the faint click of heels on marble, the rustle of silk behind a curtain, the scent of iris and smoke, the Iron Widow walking, still watching, still guarding the country she could never quite save. Because history does not bury women like Catherine. It keeps them awake. And now, our candle burns low. The corridors of time grow quiet again. If your eyes are heavy, let them close. Dream not of crowns or wars, but of peace, hard won and dearly kept. For tonight, even the ghosts have earned their rest. Good night, France. Good night, Madame Catherine.
The candles are dying. The halls of the Louvre are quiet again. Only the faint hum of the wind moves through the stones where Catherine once walked. Centuries have passed, yet her name still lingers. Whispered, judged, misunderstood. Some call her the Serpent Queen, others the savior of France. The truth, as always, lies somewhere between. She was not holy, nor was she cruel. She was simply human, a woman who refused to surrender to the world that feared her. Power had always been a man's language, and Catherine learned to speak it fluently. She built her throne from silence, her armor from grief, and though her hands were stained, they held together a kingdom that might have vanished without her. Perhaps that is her real legacy. Not the blood she spilled, but the peace she tried, again and again, to keep. So when you think of her, don't just remember the Queen in Black, or the massacre, or the poison. Remember the little girl in the convent, clutching her name like a sword, surviving because no one thought she could. In the end, every ruler becomes a story. Catherine de Medici became a warning, a reminder that power is never free, and that sometimes the price of survival is your soul. Thank you for traveling through time with me tonight. If you're still awake, I hope you found peace in the quiet echoes of history. And if you're already drifting off, then may your dreams be gentle, and may your ghosts, like hers, finally rest.